the next thing is going to be the backup, okay? And I'm going to show you 2 different ways that I want my horses to back up as far as this body control is concerned, okay? At Liberty, we actually do a couple of other ways, but that's a different video. So the first one is going to be from the top of the nose, okay? I want my horse to release off of the pressure from the top of the nose and back up. When you're teaching this, if your horse is sticky, don't try to get 20 steps backwards, okay? If your horse is really sticky, release on 1 step, immediately ask again. 1 more step, release. 1 more step, release, okay? Once your horse gets light, where you can put a little pressure on and they immediately step back, then you can start asking for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. But you're still going to have little, you have your hand on the top of the nose, and it's going to be a step, release, step, release, step, release. And so, again, it takes timing that you're watching these feet move, and it's just going to be a little more pressure with the step and a little release. So it's not going to be necessarily a huge release where you come off. You'll still have your hand there, but it's going to be a little release of pressure and step again, okay? And we use a very similar method when we're riding for our backup, so our horses don't shut down on us, because that's a lot of times a problem people will have is they pick up both reins and they hold them real tight, and the horse will give them 2 or 3 steps backwards, and then the horse will shut down and go forget it. So we're going to start on the ground, cueing each step, and then I'm going to show you in the saddle how to cue each step backwards. So, once you get your horse really light with it, you could back up the whole length of the arena and still keep a good speed without your horse shutting down, because it's not just a one big hold and wait pressure. You're going to cue each individual step, okay? So again, starting with the top of the nose. And some horses that don't release the pressure very well are going to have a little bit of trouble with this. If you're having trouble, hold, stick in there, hold it, set into your hip a little bit. If your horse just is so stuck that you're holding for a long time and your horse is not moving, then you can actually use the whip and tap him on the chest and be like, no, seriously, you need to move up. But I would recommend that you hold for a while. A lot of times horses just get kind of stuck with this one, but it's really good for teaching them to release the pressure, okay? So I'm going to ask her here, and I'm going to pressure, little release, pressure, little release, press, release, press, release, press, release, press, release, press, release. So see how my hand didn't come off? Okay, it wasn't a huge release, but it was a little release. You can see I kind of exaggerated, letting her head come forward. Again though, if your horse is stuck, you're not going to go several steps. If your horse is stuck, you're just going to get 1 step. Oh, good job. Practice that for a while, okay? Reward them, give them a cookie, pet them, whatever, if they're having a lot of trouble with it. Once they get good, where you can put some pressure on, and they take a step backwards when you put pressure on, then you can start to ask for more steps, okay? Now, I'm going to show you the second way. I'm going to put forward here. The next way is going to be back away from you. This will help your horse actually lighten up quite a bit. As far as their feet lightening up, where they're not dragging. Some horses go to back up and they really drag their feet. You can see the marks in the ground. So this is going to lighten them up a little bit, okay? We're going to use our body cue. We're going to ask your horse to back, and verbal cue as well. I put my hand up and kind of wave my hand like this. You can do a different cue. You can, go like this, whatever you want to do. But I have a body cue, and then I have my verbal cue back. Okay, so my back verbal cue is going to translate to the saddle. So I have my rope and I have my whip, okay, are going to be in one of my hands. If my horse does not respond to me, I can wiggle the rope, and I can tap him on the chest. Again, just like with our other one, if your horse is stuck and then they take a step back, release, okay? Eventually, you'll get really good where you can stand still and your horse can back way away from you. Now, unlike the first one I showed you on top of the nose, with this one, I'm backing with her. We're backing together. With this one, because I'm lightening her up, I'm going to stand still, and she should ideally back away from me. Okay? All right, I'm just going to ask her for a couple of steps here, and we may have to wake her up a little bit. So I'm going to ask her back, and then I'm going to jiggle my rope a little bit. Back. Back. Good girl. Good. Okay? We'll do a practice a couple of times until she just goes off my body. I'll ask again. Back. 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 Good. Excellent job. Good girl. So, and I want to make a point with this one that you really reward your horse for this one, because you're not really using a lot of pressure, and ideally you want to be able to do this. I mean, if you just walk into your horse's stall or whatever and you need him to move off, you want your horse to back off of you right away. with nothing on them. So you want to really reward your horse for this one. If they get really stuck, give them a cookie when they get a step back. There's nothing wrong with that. I've actually found really it's so much more effective, especially with something like this where you want them just to go off of a little cue. It's so much more effective if you give them a reward and actually, pet them, tell them they're good, give them a cookie, a real reward. A lot of times you might hear the phrase, the release is the reward, and I want to kind of debunk that myth. That's definitely a poor understanding of the definition of reward. The release is what trains. I will say that. The release, putting pressure on and then releasing when you get the desired result, that will train your horse. But it's not a reward because you put in something negative, the pressure. It's not painful, you're not beating on, but you put in something negative, which is pressure, okay? And then when your horse does something correctly, you take it away. That's not the same thing as an actual reward, pat on the back, good job, here's a cookie, okay? So I do want to really emphasize, especially if your horse gets really stuck on something like this, if you ask them, and even if you have to bring in the rope and the whip, straighten your head out a little bit. You ask them back, and even if you have to bring in the whip and the rope, and they get a step, and you give them a cookie, they'll learn so much faster. I can guarantee you that they will learn so much faster if you give them a real reward than just the release. Okay, so now for our backup. The first one, off the top of the nose. Remember, you're cueing each step, okay? So, pressure, holding. You want to toss his head a little bit. I'm not going to let him. Good. Pressure, release, press, release, press, release, press, release. Good boy. Now let's ask again, see if we get a little bit quicker response. Okay. Top of the nose. Press. Release. Good. Much better. No, now he wants to toss his head a little bit there. But see how I keep my hand on him? And you can even grab onto the halter if you need to. And, some horses will do that. You put a little pressure on them and they're going to try to throw their head up in the air and all kinds of stuff to try to get away. You can hold on to the top of his noseband and just hold until he moves off of it. If he gets stuck, I'll bring in a little extra. Good, and release. Try again. Good boy. Now I've already got a finger on his halter, so I can hold on to him. Press into it a little bit. Good. Now that time I give it to him. Alright, so again, I'm going to put my hand on top of his nose. Got a finger in the halter so I can hold on to him if he tries to toss his head. Much better. Good boy. Pressure release. Pressure release. Press release. Press release. Good boy. Much better that time. Very good. Okay, now for our next one, I'm going to bring him forward again. I'm again going to stay still and he's going to back away from me. Now he's good at this one. He can back all the way to the end of his lead rope. So again, got the lead rope at in my right hand with the whip, and he already knows what he's doing. And I cue him to back, back, back. Good boy. And you see, I'm not going to let him run over to me, especially for him, because he's pushy. I'm not going to let him back up, and then as soon as I put my cues down, let him run back to me. I'm going to keep him out, and I'm going to walk up to him. Good. Let's just do one more time. Everything's in my right hand, my left hand cues. Again, I like to use this cue. You can do all kinds of other things, but I do use the verbal back. 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 Good. Good boy. Good job. Good boy. Okay, and now you can also see as we've been working with him, he's settled down a little bit. He's not quite as nippy, not quite as distracted, and he's working a little bit better with us. And that's kind of why, especially like with these younger horses, I like to do a lot of this ground stuff before I get on. I like to get their attention, get them focused on what we're doing, remind them of where their boundaries are, because they're young, they're like little teenagers that are going to test all their boundaries every day. And so I like to do this kind of ground stuff. You've got a better trained horse, you can play with this every once in a while, get it down good, but you don't necessarily have to do it every time before you ride. The younger horses, I like to practice this stuff a lot, especially before I go to get on, just to kind of get their mind focused in first. And now he's kind of calmed down. Now see how he's not trying to grab my clothes. He got the idea. All right, I have to behave myself. And now he'll be much more pleasant for me to work with as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask her to back up. Now, if you remember, we have two different ways that we're going to back our horse up, and I always start with on top of the nose first. So I've got my fingers in her halter in case she does try to throw her head up or turn around or look at something else. I'm going to keep her attention on me. And I've got my hand on the top of her nose. I'm going to feel pressure. Good girl. And so for a horse that you're starting out with, hold and wait, and then one step you're going to release it. Release for her. Okay? You're not going to ask for a whole lot of steps back yet. Set into her a little bit. Good girl. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and ask for 2 steps. And I'm not having, she's being very light. I'm not having to put very much pressure on her at all. But with some horses you will. Some will brace against you, and you'll have to just really hold. And you know, you don't want to push all your weight into them. Just hold steady. And they'll think about it, and it may take you a little bit. And again, you can kind of rock them again. Like I said, when they brace, you can kind of rock them back and forth a little bit on their nose, and that'll help break up that tension a little bit, like this. And if it really has been a long time and you're really stuck, you can bring in your whip a little bit on their chest and move them off. So now she's got giving me one step really easy. Now I'm going to ask a couple steps from her. And it's going to be a press, release, press, release, press, release, press, release. Good girl. Now you can see she's kind of backing in a circle, so let's see if we can straighten her out a little bit. And I'm going to use my pressure to see if I can keep her straight. So this is another little game we should play with. Good. So she's moving her hip out that way. So I'm going to tip her nose this way a little bit. There you go. So that she's going to have to straighten out. Good. So see how that straightened her out? Kind of like when you disengage, okay? When you disengage your hindquarters, you're going to bring her head around to the left, and her hind end's going to go that way. It's the same sort of thing. If I want her hip to move, so let's say I want her hip to move off that way again, I can tip her head this way, and see how her hip moves? Good girl. That's something that we're also going to talk about when I'm riding, how to get your horse to back L or back a figure 8 or back a square, all these other shapes and maneuvers and things. It's going to have to do with the position of the body. So if you've got your horse straight, they should back straight. If your horse is bent, they're going to back in a circle or in a turn. Okay, so that's one thing you can play with on the ground. Tipping her nose this way as I back, her hind's going to swing away. If I wanted her hind end to swing to her left over this way, I could tip her nose that way when I back her up. And see how her hind end moves that way? So that's another thing you can play with a little bit. Now, I wouldn't do that in the beginning. I would wait until your horse has a pretty nice back up first, and then you can start to play with tipping their head and getting their hind end to move, and maybe back a circle or at least leave a little bit of a turn in there. All right, so now I'm going to ask her to back up away from me. She has not done this before. So I've got some cookies in my pocket, and if she gives me a real nice good one, I'm going to reward her for it. Just like I talked about, the reward is going to really help train this one. So I'm going to get her attention a little bit. Good girl. I've got cueing hand, and then I've got my aids in this hand right here. I'm going to stay back. I'm going to jiggle my rope and my whip a little bit. Back. Good girl. Okay, I'm going to ask again. So I release and I praise, and then immediately I'm going to go back to it. Okay? Back. Back. Oh, she's thinking. Back. Good girl. Good. And my verbal and body cue, I'm going to give it a couple seconds. I'm not going to stand there and stay back for a minute and a half before I finally bring in my other cue, because then your horse will start to ignore that. So I'm going to give her a second, get her attention, stay back, back, and then I'm going to bring it in. So I'll give her about 2 chances. Good girl. Okay, and I'm going to keep on until she moves off to my body and my verbal cues. Back, 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 back. Good girl. Good. Back, back, back. Good. Now that one was a little bit lighter, so I'm going to go ahead and give her a cookie. Girl. I did wave my rope, but I didn't have to bump her halter, so I'll give her a little more of a reward for that one. And this will help her lighten up. She'll learn if there's a reward, your horse is going to put much more effort into it. Back. 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 Now she's going side sideways from there. Good girl. So if your horse tries another way, so there she tried to step over sideways, I'm not going to give it to her. I'm going to increase a little bit more back pressure, okay? So just because they step doesn't mean you give it to them. Wait until they take a step in the right direction, okay? Now, we've been using the rope. Now this time I'm going to try tapping her on the chest and see if I can get a little bit quicker reaction from her that way. Back. 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 Good. Good girl. And like I told you in the beginning, I like to have both because some horses are going to go better off the rope and some horses are going to go better off the whip. Back. Back. Good. Good girl. That one was, I did still have to tap her, but it was very light backwards. Back. Back. Good. Yes, good girl. So you see for that one, it wasn't a whole lot of effort into it because she's still trying to figure out exactly if I'm really sure that's what I mean. But that was the first time that I just only used my verbal and body cues. And I didn't have to bump the rope or tap with the whip at all. She immediately took one, and it was just a little step with her front foot, but that's all it's going to be at first. And you want to reward them for it. Really reward them when they do it just off of your verbal and body cues. And so then I would just keep practicing it with her. If you got that far with your horse, I would do it a couple more times. Get one or two more times where they take a step back without your whip or rope, and probably put them away for that session, come back and practice it later or the next day. And over a couple of sessions, they'll get lighter and lighter until they just go off of your verbal and body cues and you don't need your aids.